Prometheus comes with a query language called PromQL, by which you can retrieve the metrics that you have stored in Prometheus. Before we deep dive into PromQL and learn it, we need to learn about the data types that are available in Prometheus. You use these data types both when you store the values in Prometheus and when you retrieve them using PromQL. So the first data type that we have is called scalar data types. The scalar data types can be float or string. When we say float, it also includes the integer values. For example, 1 is float, 1.5 is also float in the realm of Prometheus. So consider this example. In this example, we are storing a metric called Prometheus HTTP requests total that is accompanied by two labels. The first one is code, the second one is job. And the value of code is 200, but that 200 isn't a float value, that's a string value because it's surrounded by double quotes. For string values, you can either use double quotes or you can use single quotes. Both is accepted. So now imagine that we have this query. In this query, we say return all the time series where metric name is Prometheus HTTP request total and the job label is equal to Prometheus and the code label is equal to 2 point star. By saying that code should be equal to 2 point star, we are saying that we only want the first character of the code's value be equal to 2. We don't care about the rest. So you will get all the metrics where code's value is 200, 201, 205. So as you see, using the string value will give us a level of flexibility that a float data type wouldn't. However, by saying that I'm not really endorsing the string value, you have to have good reason to use any data type. Now consider this query. If we write the exact same query, however, for the value of the code, we use 200 as a float. We use the numeric value. We are not using quotations around it. If you do this, you are not going to get any results because the value of code when we stored it was a string, it wasn't float. Another data type that we have is called instant vectors. So the definition is a bit confusing. It might be hard to digest, but then when I show you the examples, it will be very easy to understand. So an instant vector selects a set of time series and a single sample value for any timestamp. In a crude term, it means that you only use the metric name in order to get that time series. You are not using a range. You only use the metric name. If you want to filter the metrics, you can use the key value pairs or labels. For example, imagine that if we run this query in Prometheus's user interface, for example, if you remember, I said in one example that we would have a metric called auth API hit. If you just write the metric name, you will get one value, which is, for example, 5, 10, 1. You only get one value. Because you only get one value, that is why it's called instant vector, because it's just one value that is sampled. So Prometheus only samples or picks up one value. Now, if you want to add some filters, you can say, I want the A sample of a metric whose name is auth API hit, but I also want to apply these filters. So I want the value of count be equal to 1 and time taken be equal to 800. If you filter it, you may get a different value. For example, you may get 1. Another data type that we have in Prometheus is range vectors. So range vectors are just similar to instant vectors. However, instead of one sample, you get a range of samples. In order to apply the range, you have to apply a time range. For that, you use a bracket. So you open the bracket, you put the time, and then you close the bracket. For example, for the metric that we had, auth API hit, if you put 5M in the bracket, you are basically saying, I want a range of 5 minutes. When you say 5 minutes, basically you are saying 5 minutes before now. So you cannot say minus 5 minutes. When you say 5 minutes, it's basically the past 5 minutes. The values that you can use are shown in this table. MS indicates milliseconds, S is for seconds, M is for minutes, H is for hours, D is for days, assuming that a day has 24 hours, W is for weeks, assuming that a week has 7 days, and Y is for years, assuming that a year has 365 days. There is nothing for month, as you can see. And these codes that you see on the left column, they are case sensitive. You have to use as you see them. So let's go to Prometheus. Okay, so we are now in Prometheus and the dark theme is active. We need to know the name of some metrics. So because we don't have it from our memory, the best thing you can do is to open a new tab and go to where your node exporter or Windows exporter is, and then click on metrics, and then you will see a whole bunch of metrics, and then you can just pick one of these and use it as example. For example, we pick node network transmit errors total, something like this. So if we just paste a metric name and then we hit enter, what you see is that we have a set of metrics. Every metric name is the same. However, the label values are different. They have been sampled on the exact same timestamp, and every row has a single value. Okay. If we look at the label device, you will see that they have different values. So that first one on the top, the device is equal to AP1. The one below that is device is equal to AWDL0. So they have different labels. So technically they are different metrics. However, if you want to apply a range, for example, we can say 30M and press enter. Now you get same metrics, but each metric will have a whole bunch of values. Maybe 30 is a bit too big. Let me do this 5 so that we can see them in one page. 5. Okay, so as you see, that node network transmit error total, that its device label was AP1, now has a whole bunch of values. I highlight them so you can see them. That is why it's a vector. And the next one that had a different device value also has a whole bunch of metrics. So that is why it's a vector. So how many of these values you get depends on the two factors mainly. The first one is the time range that you use. For example, 5 minutes or 5 days or 1 year. And then the second factor is the scraping interval that is in your Prometheus config. If you remember, in prometheus.yml or YAML file, there was a config that was a scraping interval or a scrape interval, and the default is 15 seconds. So every time that you get one scrape, you get one timestamp, and then you will have one entry. In this lecture, we want just to focus on the data type. I don't want to write a complex queries. So for now, pick up some metrics and test them and then see how many values you get. In the next lecture, we start writing proper queries.